Thor is the fourth movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and probably the worst. I don't think it's offensively bad or anything. It's actually somewhat fun of a movie. It's not terrible. But it has a cliche story that offers really nothing new and is, at the end of the day, just kind of dull. First off, it's weird to rewatch a Marvel movie and not see that now iconic Marvel credits logo at the very beginning. So that just threw me off. That has nothing to do with the movie, just a side note. I think the visual design and aesthetics of the movie are great. However, a lot of the visual effects used to get that done don't really hold up that well. There's a lot of times where you can clearly see the separation of the practical set they built and the green screen that's behind it. Chris Hemsworth is serviceable as Thor. I think over the years he's grown, certainly as an actor, grown more charisma and charm and acting chops. This movie, he has a bit of that, but he's not very interesting of a character, honestly. Tom Hiddleston gives a shining performance, though. He's among the greatest Marvel villains in the movies. I think the only person that even kind of gives him a run for his money, I think, is Michael Keaton's Vulture from just this year. Anthony Hopkins is great as usual. He usually shines in like an authoritative, almost epic story, kind of like this. Natalie Portman's a great actress, but she's not really given much to work with. Her character, and really all the human characters, are written like they're in a romantic comedy, which I think would be fine if this movie decided to go with that tone. But they really don't, so it's just kind of, she's just kind of there. She's not really useful at all. Kat Dennings gets a bad rap for these movies. I don't think it's her. I think she's fine for her part, but like Natalie Portman, she's written to be the funny sidekick of the female lead in a romantic comedy, and it doesn't work in this movie. She has maybe 2 funny lines toward the beginning, and then she's more or less forgotten about for the rest of the movie. Hawkeye has a cool introduction, although you never really actually see him fight or even shoot an arrow, I don't think, in the whole movie. But he's kind of given a cool little setup, like a nod to what's to come. He's basically treated as a henchman in this movie. A henchman that just is on the sidelines kind of watching, which I think is kind of a cool way to treat him, because that's really what he was before the Avengers. Thor's Asgardian friends, though, are very underdeveloped. You never really get a sense that they... Like, you get the sense that they bonded with Thor, but they also grew up with Loki, and so they never really set up that why they never bonded with Loki either, though. It always seems like they're Thor's best friend and they don't like Loki, and you never really get a reason why until there's like the twist that's revealed that Loki betrayed Thor, and even then, with the information that is given at the time, you don't know how much of his betrayal it was. It really just seems like Loki tattletaled to Anthony Hopkins, and that's all that he did. He was just a tattletale, and apparently they all hate him for that. Obviously, we know more now at the end of the movie after the revelation that he's the one that led to everything. But you never really get a sense why they hate Loki so much. I think most of the aspects of this movie is fine, but I think this is a shining example of how much script and writing actually matters. A young alien with special powers crash lands on Earth, sent by his father. He's taken in by a family, and he grows as a person, and as a hero. And at the end, an alien from his home world comes to destroy people, and he has to become the hero he was meant to be to save the day. So, what movie did I just describe? Did I describe the Christopher Reeve Superman, the Tom Welling Superman, the Brandon Routh Superman, the Henry Cavill Superman, or Thor? Basically, this movie's a Superman movie. I think Marvel was stuck at the time. They'd been building up to this Avengers, and they didn't think that a fully Asgardian, a fully alien sci-fi movie would be fitting into this universe. And at the time, I can kind of agree. I mean, the universe was still pretty small back then. There had only been 3 movies before this, and 2 of those were Iron Man movies, and one of them was a really bad Incredible Hulk movie. Obviously, we know now that movies like Guardians of the Galaxy are the biggest franchises that Marvel has now. But I think the writers were looking for a way to get Thor onto Earth, and they kind of just went with the generic plot that we've seen in every iteration of Superman. However, I think if they went a different route, there's a couple different ways they could have made this work. I think they try to make this work through multiple ways, but they never really choose one. They try to do so many different types of story in this. First, they have the fish out of water story of Thor trying to get used to Earth's customs and whatnot. Second, we have the romantic comedy of Thor falling in love with Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman's a little clumsy and she keeps hitting Thor with his car. It's like a ha-ha running gag. But at the end, her funny little sidekick friend and her disapproving father figure all come around to liking Thor and accepting him, and they fall in love. It also tries to be a coming-of-age story, where Thor starts off as this young hothead who acts on impulse, and in the end he takes a step back and he learns to think a little more strategically, more like an adult. And fourth, this is something that's less touched on in the movie, but I think it would have been a really interesting plot if they did, is a storyline that they used in the Ultimates series of comic books, where basically this is kind of the S.H.I.E.L.D. aspect in the middle of the movie, where he's detained and people are trying to figure out, obviously this guy is special, obviously there's more than meets the eye, but they're trying to figure out if all the stuff that he's saying is bullshit, like if he's psychotic, or if he's actually a Norse god. I think that would have been kind of cool to play with that a little bit more, of almost kind of a questioning psychological movie. Obviously they didn't go this route though, they barely dipped their toes in it. And this movie just tries to juggle all these different tones and storylines together, and you can take one or two of those things and make them work together. We've seen good coming-of-age romantic comedy, or good fish-out-of-water coming-of-age stories, but when they try to combine all these genres into one, the movie just feels very unfocused on where it wants to go. And I think if they had a better direction with this, it would have been a lot more of an interesting take on the same story. The writing also is just very lazy at times. All of a sudden Loki has a robot that he sent to kill them. Like, that just kind of comes out of nowhere. Then Thor's friends go in to fight it, and in the course of like 30 seconds, they're all either injured or they retreat because they're afraid and they don't think they can take it on. Like, Thor's Asgardian warrior friends are completely helpless without Thor. And then, of course, they have the very cheesy girlfriend holding the wounded soldier saying, "I'm so sorry and I love you," and all that crap. And then right after, like, you have this heartfelt, touching moment, he rises back to power and he fights. And it's just so, we've seen that a million times. Also there, whenever she's holding Thor, Thor's face is all bloody. He'd been beat up by the robot after like one punch. And all of a sudden he grabs his hammer, he gets struck by lightning, and all of a sudden he's fully fresh faced and healed. And it's just, like, I guess, does Mjolnir, the hammer, heal him? Does the lightning heal him? If so, every time he has his hammer, which is like all the time going forward, he's like the most badass person who's invulnerable. Like, he can just heal himself with raising his hammer and striking lightning or whatever. Like, it's just so, it's not set up well, it's just very lazy. Then Idris Elba, who's also in this movie to a very lesser extent than all the other characters I mentioned. He is frozen in this ice before that big battle scene, and then as soon as Thor is crying his name from a different world, Idris Elba all of a sudden finds the will to crack through the ice, but he never even, like, attempted to do that in the 20 minutes he was frozen leading up to that. Also, it's not like carbon freezing. Like, he's frozen in ice. That dude is either suffering hypothermia or he's going to suffocate. Then Odin randomly wakes up from his days, if not weeks-long coma, and doesn't take any time to recover, but in a matter of seconds is able to run across that rainbow bridge and grab Thor and save him and Loki from falling into the abyss. And why? How? Like, he just recovers from his coma all of a sudden to save them. It's just lazy. And again, I don't hate this movie. I think it has a lot of problems, though. It's, in my opinion, the worst of the Marvel movies. I'd put it under Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, and Thor the Dark World. Although I haven't rewatched any of those movies recently. Thor the Dark World I will be rewatching soon, so maybe I'll have an updated opinion where I hate it. But for now, I give Thor 6 abs out of 10. Anyway, guys, make sure to hit subscribe, see that Thor the Dark World review coming out soon, as well as one for Thor Ragnarok when that releases, as well as every other movie that I'm going to review. I'm trying to make this a semi-often thing, doing at least 2 to 3 videos a week. We'll see if I can actually keep up with that, because I'm not great at that, obviously. But make sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned.
I have sacrificed much to to achieve peace? Thor, through your arrogance and stupidity, you have opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror